Hello, welcome to Drawing the Light Photography Behind the Lens, episode number 2. Cool. Welcome. A bit later than what it was meant to be. I do apologise, but I had a lot on, been very busy, so it's out. So we're doing this today. Okay. Just going to get the bits and pieces out of the way, and then we'll get on to today's topic where I talk about the creative process. Okay. Right, so first things first, the Patreon. You can help and support all the shows on this network by subscribing, give it a look. Most of the shows have their own individual tiers and different levels for different things. Some have merch, some have certain perks, you get extra shows, bonus content, stuff like that. So you can help us out by picking one of those. It helps keep everything running. Okay. We also have a Twitter for the network. Basically, it's you hashtag and whatever show it is what first hashtag. In this instance, it'd be hashtag Drawing the Light Photography. Okay. And the same for the Instagram. This thing here. So that's for the network's Instagram. And of course, we should probably plug it as well. Drawing the Lights Instagram is this one right here. So we have this is our Instagram here. This is for fashion and normal photo stuff like that. And this one here, this is for the weddings and events we do. So if that's your thing, you can check that one out as well. The links are in the description below. Right. So this is a tough one for people at the creative process because everyone has their own way of being creative and doing what they want to do, as they should do. This is a very important thing, I think, when it comes to particularly whether you're a photographer, model, actor, musician, whatever you may be. If you're a creative of some kind, you generally have your own method of doing stuff. And I think it's very important that you do. I myself have my own method of doing things, and I'm going to get into a bit of that now. I'm not going to go into exact details because, to be honest, I don't want to. I just want to give you a vague idea of what I do. But particularly when it comes to photo shoots in general, not anything more than that, because obviously certain things require specific skills. I'm just going to give you a basic general idea of stuff that goes on. Okay, we'll skip past the initial part where someone contacts me to arrange a shoot, blah, 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 right? So at that point, client decides someone to do a shoot. Okay, I am one of these. I personally, and this is how I work. Mood boards are a no-no. I don't use them. I don't like them. Okay, the reason I do not like them, and this is me explain to you why. So there'll be a lot of people that go, "Oh, well, how do you know what you're going to shoot?" Okay, I'm going to get onto that. Right. I think mood boards have their place. Absolutely, they do. For makeup artists, set designers, and stylists. Okay, absolutely for them, because that does help them. For a photographer, what you're doing is negating their ability to be creative. Okay, you're not giving them the scope of doing anything which will be different. You almost might as well just copy and paste the images you're using as an example in that regard for a mood board, and just use those, because essentially that is what you're asking the photographer to do. And I personally think that's a bad thing. Bear in mind, this is my opinion on this. Everybody will have their own opinions on this, and that's good. Okay, because we should all have our own ways of doing things. This is my opinion here, just to be clear. Doesn't mean anyone else is right or wrong. This is my opinion. But mood boards are a no-no for me. Don't like them at all. But as far as shooting with someone goes, this is why you talk to your client, okay? Because you can always work out what they want by talking to them. It's called communication, okay? And I find that much more valuable than somebody just giving you a piece of paper going, oh I want this. The problem you have as a photographer is if a client comes to you and goes, oh, I want this, this, and this, your client might not be able to do that. So you've then got to try and explain to your client You can't do that because it doesn't suit you, or there could be a number of reasons why it doesn't work. There is a rare times you can do it. Should you? That's up to you. It's your judgment call. I personally wouldn't still, because you should never directly try and copy something. Be inspired by something. Absolutely be inspired. Inspiration is a great thing. Copying, however, is not. That is not being creative. You are, in fact, a photocopier at that point, or a Xerox machine, for those of you who are older. So, yeah. So I like to talk to the clients, see what they want. I mean, their personalities will also give you an idea of what they like as well, how they dress, stuff like that. Because this is if you're dealing, particularly if you're dealing with individuals. If you're dealing with a company, this is where it slightly differs. Again, so I'm not a fan of a mood board, but a company has its brand. So the brand itself will tell you the kind of things they like. And using your own experience as a photographer, you can work out the kind of stuff they want. You do not need a mood board. I don't need a mood board anyway. Because from what the branding is for the company, you can tell what they'll want. Because I'll give you a generic example. So this isn't any particular person I've done, company I've done work with or anything, but it gives you an idea of what I'm trying to explain to you. Basically, if you do the photo shoot, for instance, with a trainer company, for example, and people they want to buy their trainers are the under 30s, basically teenagers to the 30-year-olds. Okay, so 15 to 30, let's just say. The way you'll shoot do a shoot like that is you're bear in mind their target audience, the demographic, if you will, if you're familiar with TV ratings. This will give you an idea. Because advertisers do this as well. They target certain demographics, people who they want to sell to. And it's the same for companies when they market stuff, whether it's trainers, shirts, whatever. Now, if it's a company who's making shoot trainers for that demographic, then you have to bear in mind they're looking at younger people. So you have to look at them. Are these trainers meant for sportswear? In which case, you find somewhere sporty to do this stuff, like a leisure centre or a park or a gym, or somewhere like that, because it helps you to find a location as well for a shoot, which is important. Sometimes the company will come to you with a location in mind, in which case they know their own brand, so they should be able to give you a decent location to work with, in which case that does make this easier. But if you're having to scout location for a company, which sometimes we do have to do, you need an idea of what kind of thing you're looking at depending on the brand. And in this instance, you'd be looking at like a running track, athletic centre, stuff like that. And then you have to look at, are they traditional? Are they stylish? Are they edgy? Are they groundbreaking? In which case, you may do some out-the-box sort of shots for a up-and-coming, like a startup or a trendy company, because of what they want. Some of the more traditional ones, for instance, I'll give you an example. I've not done stuff for Nike, but I'll use Nike as an example. Nike have a very particular brand as to what they want. So you can use that long history of what they got as a guide as to what they want. Okay, this is through their branding. So you can work out from that the kind of stuff they are probably going to want from you as a photographer. So that's how I look at that one anyway. So that's how I'd get my ideas and method of doing that, rather than using a mood board, because the mood board is also very, there it is, and there's nothing other than that. When you talk to a person or you do research yourself, you are going to learn a lot more and get much better quality out of it by doing that stuff yourself, rather than just relying upon somebody just giving you paperwork, which is essentially what a mood board is for a photographer. So also the other thing with something like that is, obviously once you get to that point, then you have to bear in mind the kind of models you're going to shoot with as well, and get an idea of what you want them to do, poses. Always have an idea of the kind of pose you're going to need to do for the shoot you want to do. If it's a sporty shoot, then obviously there's probably going to be somewhere you're going to do lots of movement, like running, jumping, stuff like that, in which case know how to use your camera to do those sort of shots, because some of those can be quite tricky. Also, depending on the kind of equipment and shoes these are, for example, if it's a training company, then you need to know how to shoot people's feet when they're running. And also what sort of angle it is. Are you trying to catch the labels? Are you trying to catch the design on the side? You need to bear all these things in mind when you're being with the creative process. But at the same time, you still also should be able to create something different and unique, but also still on brand, which is the important thing. Always be on brand for a company who has a particular brand they want to do, but you can also use your own creativity to help that brand. It's an important thing. The other option, of course, and this is what's one I'd always tell people to at least consider, do some shots that you think will work, and then do some shots that you think will work for the company. They may end up being different styles. In which case, you then give them the options, okay? Because people love options, okay, when it comes to stuff. This is how I shoot generally. I will shoot if I do a photo shoot with someone, for example, I will shoot the way that I know they like for their stuff, because people, you can really work out people quite easy as to what they kind of like. But also, I will add a few different extra bits and pieces on, which I wouldn't necessarily have done before, and it gives me an idea of their reaction to that as to whether it works or not. In which case, if it does, then I know there's much more I can work with. But you don't know unless you try stuff like that. But always make sure you give the client what they want. This is the important thing when it comes to being creative. You can be creative, absolutely be creative, but make sure if you're dealing with a client, that the client gets what they're paying you for. It's very important. So, but obviously that's the creative process when you're dealing with like a client, if it's a mod fashion shoot or bridal shoot or whatever it may be. However, if you were just doing stuff for yourself, like, because a lot of us photographers, we will go out and we will go somewhere and we'll just take some pictures of stuff, because we just do. I mean, I myself take nature pictures, landscape and astrophotography pictures. I do this quite regularly. And that stuff is where you can really experiment, because the only person you're doing that for is you. And it's always a good idea to experiment when it's just you, because nobody cares if it goes wrong or if it sucks. But by you doing that, you learn stuff. And this is very important, because these things can also help you when it comes to doing actual shoots with people too. Because something a lot of people won't tell you is a lot of these things cross over. They are transferable between the different kinds of shoots. But you need to understand these skills to get them. I mean, I'll give you an example. The very first type of photography I ever did was astrophotography. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's when you take pictures of the sky, like the planets, the moons, the stars, stuff like that. That's what I first started doing. And one of the most basic principles of photography is light. If you can do photography at night, that kind of photography particularly, there is no type of photography that will ever cause you a problem in regards to lighting, because that is the hardest type of environment to work with when it comes to lighting, is night sky photography. If you can do that, you're fine. You'll never have an issue. But again, a lot of that stuff is also technical, so you need to understand the technical side of it too, which is where a lot of the technical knowledge will come from for people. In my case, I was lucky because I was a stargazer long before I was a photographer, so that helped me. So I learned very quickly in that regard. So it helped form that. But because of the things I started taking photos of and stuff, it helped me form my own creative process and idea. But here's the important part when it comes to the creative process. Always have your own. Okay? You can be inspired and learn stuff from other people. Absolutely. I do it all the time. However, I personally don't like copying, and I don't do it because it sucks for me. If I'm going to produce something, I want to produce something which I am proud of, to know it is my work, and also the work of, for instance, if it's a photo shoot with models and stuff, then I want that work to be the result of me and the model creating that. Obviously, yes, the makeup artists and stylists and stuff like that, if they're involved, would be a contributing factor towards that. Of course it will. But the two main aspects for a photo shoot particularly are the photographer and the model. And between the two of them, you create the end result, which is why I think it's important. In the creative process is one of the most important things you'll ever do as a photographer is this: communication. Okay, because there's times I've turned up on photo shoots for various reasons where I've dealt with people, and how do I put this? The photographer will just be there and they will just be going, "Go click, 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 and the model will just almost look like doing headlights because they're just doing the poses that models learn how to do. But there's no back and forth. It's like you're not telling them if it's good, if it's working, do we need to do something else? And to me, that's a bad thing because I believe you need to communicate with your model because you get the best results of both of you if you give back and forth and you converse, because the two of you between you will get an idea of what will work for you and what will not and what you're looking for. Two big things. But the most important thing I think the creative process is actually communication. Everything else you can learn in one form or another. Yes, we'll all still be different, absolutely, but communicating is something you kind of need to be able to do, full stop. No matter what kind of things you're shooting, especially if you're doing events and weddings, which is what I primarily do. If you can't communicate with a bride, for example, for like a wedding, you've got a problem because the bride's the most important person at a wedding. So she's the one that you need to make sure is happy. Okay. And other than that, you can have your own creative license to do certain things, but again, this comes back to the thing before. Make sure that they're happy, because the bride replaces like a company, for example. Because your client is the one who matters. In a wedding, for example, your client generally 9 times out of 10 tends to be the bride. If it's not the bride, it's usually the bride's father or the groom. It's very rare it's those two that it tends to be the bride. But even if it's the bride's father or the groom, the one you got to make sure he's happy is the bride. And for many, many reasons. But yeah, that's a lot of the creative process stuff, really. A lot of it is a lot of stuff you can learn. There's various tutorials out there. There's people you can talk to. And yeah, there's a million different things out there. But the one thing you have to be able to do is just say, sorry. Hopefully you didn't hear that. That was kind of loud. So, yeah, the important thing is to actually be creative. When you are creative, also listen. Take in what you're hearing, absorb yourself. Always learn, okay? Because this is one of these things I will tell you, plus creative process, but also plus life in general. You should always be learning. If you stop learning, you're gonna end up losing ground. You're not gonna be able to do stuff, and it becomes problematic because you won't be able to. You'll be, for example, you'll be here, and the other person who's learning stuff still is going to be off in the distance, like, yay, look, I'm off still doing stuff, and you're just stuck not learning or moving forward, because yeah, that can be hard. You have to remember also life is change, and that's the same with the creative process as well. Don't be too stuck in a rigid way of being creative. Worst thing you can do, you need to be flexible. Okay, you need to be able to learn and adapt, because a lot of times, particularly, I can speak from experience on this one, you will go to do an event, for example. This is where event photography is very good for this. You'll turn up at the venue, and you may not have had the chance to scout the venue beforehand. If you can always scout a venue beforehand for weddings and events, I recommend you do so for many reasons, one of which, the most important one, being lighting. I, for example, did a nightclub photography thing. I do this quite regularly, but obviously not since COVID, of course. But I went to probably the very first nightclub I ever did a photo shoot in, and it was so dark in there. And if I hadn't had my background in night sky photography, I would have had a lot of issues in that club. It still wasn't easy because of what was involved. But this helped with my creative process, because I was like, how can I make this work for me? And then it occurred to me, use my environment. Because this was a kind of nightclub where you had disco lights, the flashing strobes and all sorts of stuff. So I used those to help me with the pictures, because it helps me with lighting. And the rest of it, that's because outside of that, using right, you can do a bunch of technical stuff with the cameras as well. I'm not going to go into that because that's pretty much a long thing on its own, and it will take a very long time to go through. But if you understand your camera enough to understand how lighting works with your camera and how to make the best out of that, whether it's low light or too much light, because that's a thing as well, then particularly with low light though, in this instance, because this was the example I gave you, then you can create some very interesting images using your environment, which you wouldn't otherwise do because you'll be, oh, it's fine, I've got lighting, it's okay. Because sometimes what you find is when you have the absence of certain things, it makes you think more. And this is, again, it stops you getting stuck in a rut. Always just basically just doing the same thing over and over, over and over, over and over. And it's not a good thing. But this is where photography is very useful, because very rarely are any two venues going to be exactly the same. So there's always new things you're going to learn and do. But yeah, so with the creative process particularly, communication is one, understanding your equipment's another one, and the third one is understanding your location, particularly indoor locations, because indoor locations, the biggest issue of an indoor location, as I said before, is lighting, because not everywhere is well lit. And there are also venues and places, by the way, and this is the big one, because I imagine there's a few people out there going, well, you could just use a flash. Well, here's the thing. You can't use flashes everywhere. There are certain venues you cannot use a flash. They do not let you. You're not allowed. So you have to understand how to do these things without using a flash. And that is why I'm mentioning these things. And I didn't mention the flashes before, because sometimes you can't use them. You're not allowed to. Particularly in certain wedding venues, because of the age of the buildings, and the flash is called corporate damage. There's a variety of reasons why certain venues just will not let you use a flash. And you can't be complaining and whinging about that. It's the venue's rules. You have to abide by them. It's as simple as that. And that, again, can help with innovation and adaptation and help you with your creative process. Because once you know you can't do certain things, you've got to be, well, what can I do instead? And it helps you think and hopefully come up with some interesting ideas. That's my theory anyway. So, yeah, let's see. Is there anything else we need to cover? I mean, this is only supposed to be a basic one about the creative process. I'm not going to go into endless detail, because that would be hours worth of talking, and nobody really wants to sit through that. I don't think anyway. I may be wrong. If I am, you guys can let me know. And maybe I'll put it on the Patreon stuff, and people can do that. But essentially, that's the basics of the creative process, at least from my point of view, as a photographer. So there you go, really. I think with that, we should pretty much wrap it up, because I never like these being too long anyway. And, I think we've got a nice sized chunk here. So obviously, if you guys have any questions or comments, you can always put them in the YouTube comments down below, or you can contact us through the social medias and stuff like that. Yeah, of course, if you do wish to actually book moi for anything, you can always contact me through here, through our Instagram here. Also, we have a website here. All the links for the photography stuff for us, for Drawing the Light Photography, is in the description below. So you can always get hold of us that way, and you can also see examples of my work too. So, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, I believe I will let you all go and have a nice day. And I am off to finish more editing, because I was editing before I started this. I'm going to be editing afterwards, at least for a few hours, and then I have another show to do. So I will speak to you guys next month, because this is a monthly show. So we'll see you then. So goodbye.